Hey guys, what's up? It's Thomas. Today we're back here with the Green Scorpion. So, here comes part 2 of Monster Month. Today, well, get ready for some lessons, because we got the top 10 video game mad scientists. Yep, these guys pretty much use science for evil, and look out for their concoctions. You know, don't want to be drinking them. So, I think we all know who's the top. Dr. Eggman? Seeing those robots of his. Whew. But I feel like there's going to be some more, but I'm actually kind of curious to see who makes the list. Shall we check it out? Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's see who makes the list. Here we go. Here we go. I'm engaged.
It's alive!
It's alive! Frankenstein, everybody?
Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, and in the
Yo,
realm
yo.
of Halloween icons and nerdy media trivia, there's a funny discourse around the figure of Frankenstein. You know, Frankenstein, big green reanimated amalgamation of body parts. Well, half
That's
of
not
you
the
know this
name.
already, but the monster's
That's
name
the
isn't
monster.
Frankenstein. He's called Frankenstein's
Monster, yeah.
Or Adam if you read the original Mary Shelley novel. Please stop dead naming my friend. Frankenstein is the scientist,
Yeah.
Victor Frankenstein, who created this quote-unquote monster while trying to play God. In short, an intelligent person knows that Frankenstein isn't the monster, but a wise person knows that Frankenstein was the monster. While many horrors are the work of
Basically, the
vampires
doctor
or
was the
ghosts
true
or
monster all along.
demons, sometimes the being responsible is just a simple human. The one with a very high opinion of themselves. The mad scientist is a trope that dates back as early as science fiction itself, born from the concern that in humanity's quest for discovery, we might step too far and unearth something truly horrendous. Like the ancient Greek myths of heroes and hubris, but with more robots and lab coats.
Yep.
Sometimes zombies. Science is a wonderful thing, giving us important inventions like the cure for polio and the Nintendo GameCube. But sometimes science is fidgeting with
hi,
something
Lovato.
outside of your comfort zone, and you wish that they would just leave well enough alone, like with nuclear weapons or the Wii U. Sometimes the mad scientist is
wrong.
well-meaning and is just bitten off more than they can chew. Sometimes the scientist was always malevolent and pursued science as a tool for world domination. Or sometimes they just love science so much that they find it's their duty to answer every question, disregarding the consequences in their quest for objective truth. Either way, this motivation makes for a compelling character, be they friend, foe, or quirky NPC, and we're here to honor them
both.
today, because
we
they
go.
may be haphazard, but they help the plot happen, and that's what we're here to see. The usual rules here, games I played, one per franchise, blah blah blah. The only unique qualifier I have this time is that I want the mad scientist to actually be good at science. We all love Aperture Science's Cave Johnson, who killed himself with moon dust and paved the way for GLaDOS. But the truth is that Cave was a
Got lucky.
salesman who happened to own an experimental science company. He didn't actually know how any of this stuff worked. Same with Huey Emmerich, who is an A-plus hateable punching bag, but not as brilliant as he lets on. I mean, sure, he understands the mechanics of a Metal Gear, but most of his achievements are actually plagiarized from other people throughout the series. I'd like our mad scientists to actually have invented the things that they're famous for, not just reappropriating them. And no, they don't have to be evil, but they do have to be mad. We should be questioning their sanity at least a little bit. And with that,
Yeah, I mean,
an
it's
object
in the
at
name,
rest
mad
tends to
scientist.
stay at rest, so let's get this list into motion. These are my top
we
10
go.
video game mad scientists. Pull the lever, comic.
Emperor's New Groove, anybody? Ugh, why do we even have that lever?
Why do we even have that lever?
I don't know. Emperor's New Groove reference? He is mod, by the way.
Team
Okay.
Fortress 2 provides a lot of
It's the
inspiration for the
medic.
Countdown community. Now that
You
it's
can hear
getting
the music.
dangerously close to 20 years old, it's interesting to look back on how we perceived this game back when it first launched. If you asked me in 2007, I'd have told you that Engineer would be a great candidate for this list, given his deadly turrets and space-bending teleporters. And I guess all of the TF2 mercenaries are a little bit batty, but upon talking to good old NG, he's actually the most laid-back member on the team.
Yeah, less
on
mad.
On the other hand, we have the
calm,
medic,
but there's
the class
there
technically responsible
mad
for
side
the
just
least
himself.
amount of bloodshed, putting
The
his
Uber
attention
Chad.
towards healing the injured rather than fighting. Until 2011, when his bio video Meet the Medic came out and completely changed how we perceive this character.
Oh yeah,
The medic
he
isn't
lost
here
his
to
medical
heal the
license.
sick or comfort the ailing. He's here to get injured men back on the battlefield to cause as much havoc to the enemy side as possible. Essentially, if our side has less injury, the other will have more.
Yep.
The true nature of our German surgeon is revealed when we see his operating room, which Frankenstein himself would call inhumane. His patient is conscious on the table during open heart surgery, the medic's pet doves are free to fly about and nest in open wounds, the medic carelessly breaks ribs and replaces organs, then lies about it to the patient, and in the fridge...
Kill me later.
Oh, that
Later.
poor spy. But can you really argue with these results? I mean, yes, you can, but
Uh-huh.
the results are nonetheless impressive. Medics claim
Even
to
left
fame
a
the
bird in
Medigun
Spice-
allows
or
him to
Scout's
constantly
chest.
heal the wounds of his allies at a short distance,
Okay, bitches.
outpacing most bullet wounds and even
That's true.
overhealing targets to 150% of their maximum health. The medic himself has some health regen to keep himself alive, no doubt from his own dubious drug supply. If caught by himself, the medic can attempt to fight back either with a melee weapon like his bone saw, or a gun that fires syringes, which is a pretty twisted invention when you think about
Youch.
it. But his most impressive accomplishment is the Uber
There
charge.
you go.
Having surgically implanted invasive devices into all of his friends, the medic can charge
And
up
in the
his
comics,
medigun
sold
to
his
provide
friend's
temporary
soul. Not kidding.
invincibility. Perfect for overtaking key capture points, muscling through bottlenecks, and wiping out an engineer's defense bastion. It's for this reason that the medic and the heavy have such a legendary bromance. Before Team Fortress 2, playing a healer in a team-based game was always a bit of a bummer, but the medic's playstyle is great for letting you be helpful on the move while encouragingly showing you how
Thank
much
you,
devastation
Medigun.
is made possible by your aid. And of course, all of this is just the standard equipment. Since the game's launch, Valve's released
Ubisoft.
several other tools that you can switch into the medic's loadout. The Crusader's crossbow to make the medic a more offensive threat. Alternative mediguns that provide movement buffs or guaranteed critical hits upon ubercharge instead of invincibility. And all manner of melee weapons. The funniest to me is the bust of Hippocrates. Hippocrates was an ancient Greek philosopher and
Hippocratic
a
oath,
namesake
everybody.
of the Corpus Hippocraticum, an oath that all doctors must take to be ethical with medicine and always do what's best for the health of others. Summarized in the mantra, do no harm. Beating someone to death with that man's statue proves that medic didn't really grasp
Yeah,
that
even it
sentiment,
says do no
or
harm.
so outright rejected it. Kudos to Val for taking the guy you'd think would be most compassionate and making him the most psychotic and low-key maybe the funniest character in the game.
Would you like a second opinion? You are also
Well,
ugly.
ugly! There we go. Oh, Animal Cruelty coming up. Bioshock. Number 9.
Here in civilized modernity, we have laws that prevent this kind of mad science.
Welcome to
but
Rapture.
beneath the waves of the objectivist utopia of Rapture, great men and women are free to pursue progress without tripping over trifling workers' unions or Geneva conventions. Not long after your arrival by Bathysphere, you're likely to hear of Rapture's leader of science, Yi Su Chong. And for good reason. The man is behind just about every scientific achievement in yesterday's Land of Tomorrow. Granted, you won't get that much face time with the Korean creative, as he's already dead by the time you arrive in Bioshock 1, but you'll get to know
Yeah,
him well through his audio
Bioshock.
logs, not to mention his 3 most impressive inventions. Most prominent of these are the plasmids. Created from a unique substance called Atom that's harvested in sea slugs, plasmids provide superpowers to the paying masses by way of painful-looking syringes. That's
Yeah.
what you came to Rapture for, right? No FDA approval needed. If you have the will and the money to afford these, you too can shoot
Stabby, stabby.
lightning and bees out of your hands and knees. Looks painful, turned a lot of people into crazed splicers, but hey, that was the choice.
Sorry.
What isn't the subject's choice is mental conditioning. While Su Chong himself didn't create the creepy little sisters that collect Atom from dead splicers, he did pioneer motives of brainwashing to make sure that the girls continued their work. He also developed the ace in the hole, creating the key phrase, "Would you kindly?" that would control Sleeper Agent Jack to do whatever he was commanded. You can listen to him testing this in this lovely data log.
Break that puppy's neck. Would you kindly? No! No!
The good doctor was even dabbling in multiversal travel, as seen in Bioshock Infinite Burial at Sea. Witnessing some tears between his world and the alternate reality of Columbia, Su Chong was able to share ideas with Jeremiah Fink of Fink Industries, who plagiarized a lot of his ideas. So really, we have Su Chong to thank for most of the marvels in Infinite as well. So that's the man's work, but what kind of person was Yi Su Chong? While in Burial at Sea, you get to remote work with him for a little bit, and he doesn't leave the best impression. By all accounts, he was a little rat. Su Chong cares about two things, self-preservation and continuing his experiments. He played both sides of Aaron Ryan's war against Frank Fontaine, developing technology for both of them, and when Fontaine lost, he slunk back to Ryan's side knowing that the value of his work would keep him alive. Not that I feel bad for Ryan or Fontaine, screw those guys. You could argue that Su Chong's just doing what he needs to survive. In my second favorite Su Chong audio log, we hear him reminiscing on his life before Rapture. How he was a doctor in Korea until the Japanese army stormed his village, killing everyone but him when he offered to make the soldiers opiates. This could be seen as a sympathetic backstory, how he had to be useful to his enemy to survive a heinous situation. But the way he talks about it, he doesn't sound regretful.
War, a terrible thing. Japanese kill every man in my city, except for Su Chong. Su Chong have opium. Very good opium. This war, terrible thing too, but not for Su Chong.
In fact, he sounds proud of his usefulness, suggesting that he survived because he was
also,
better than all the villagers who couldn't bargain for their lives. People in Rapture were cruel and racist towards Su Chong too, even getting his nationality wrong most of the time, but Su Chong was a monster living amongst monsters, and as it so happens, making monsters. Which brings me to my favorite Su Chong audio log, The Big Daddy. Su Chong's trying to condition the Metal Hulks to protect the Little Sisters, and failing to do so, in his frustration, he slaps one of the poor little girls. And it turns out the conditioning worked, with some unforeseen help from Elizabeth Comstock, and he's enlightened by a rusty drill through his abdomen.
What are you doing? Get back!
Bye, Doc!
Get back!
Oh! Whoops! Ouch!
A fitting end to the reclusive genius, dying as he completes his finishing touch to Rapture. Su Chong reminds me of a quote by J. Robert Oppenheimer. Any man whose error takes 10 years to correct is quite a man. In person, Su Chong has more in common with the sea slugs he researches than the powerful men he works for. But his errors long outlive him, and long outlive those powerful men. Though I don't think he'd feel remorse, he'd just take issue with us calling his works errors.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, it does look like mad scientists themselves, too.
Bet you didn't expect to be coming to Hyrule for this list. The Legend of Zelda is much more fantasy than sci-fi, and sure, we've had some quirky NPCs with some academic
Breath of the Wild? I mean, that's the only...
hyperfixations, but no one prominent enough to make the list, right? Well, that might have been true before the open-world Zelda titles, where ancient science plays a big role in the proceedings and gives us the breakout character of Purah.
Oh, hey, Purah.
Purah?
Oh,
She's
hi,
not
Ari.
a mad scientist. She's just a quirky little bean.
Yeah, but have you really thought about what she does in the story? I'm not calling her a bad person, not by any stretch, but her work wouldn't exactly earn her a Nobel Prize. Though it might just get her on the cover of Vogue. Purah was a young adult just before the Calamity and a member of the Sheikah tribe. In fact, she's the older sister of Impa, who eventually became the elder of Kakariko Village. You'd think that the elder should be the sibling who's, eldest? Well, Purah was too busy uncovering the secrets of the Sheikah's ancient ancestors to learn how to lead a village. And when I say she's a mad scientist, I don't mean that she has any evil
we're off the Champions of Hyrule
but
for
she
this
is
one.
developing technology by the seat of her pants, and that constantly leads to unforeseen consequences. The Calamity itself could be called one of those consequences, in fact, as Calamity Ganon quickly took over all of the ancient robotic guardians that Purah herself refurbished. They destroyed everything and nearly killed Link, if not for Purah's work in the Shrine of Resurrection, but that had the unplanned side effect of erasing Link's memories. Purah did restore the Sheikah Slate and even improved upon its many magical functions. That's a complete success. If you disregard the rune that got left on the cutting room floor, the Age Reversal Rune. An
Oh.
incomplete function that I guess used a similar technology to Stasis or maybe even the Zonai's Recall. Purah thought to use this rune to allow retired Hyrulean soldiers to get back on the battlefield, which sounds like something that the medic would say. Seriously, let them rest. Regardless, Purah decided to use herself as a test subject, never a good sign when you have to resort to that.
Oops.
So by the time Link wakes up, the 120-something Purah is now in the body of a sassy 6-year-old with no clue how to correct it. And she's making flirtatious comments to me that make me really uncomfortable. I mean, technically it's not hurting anybody, but it is deeply weird. Made weirder to me that no other character ever questions the moral implications of this whole project. Ultimately, Purah's got no qualms messing with the forces of life and death, a true Frankenstein at heart. A few years later, in Tears of the Kingdom, we find out that Purah's reversed the reversed and has landed on the biological age of about 20, and now she's driving the fan base mad. So much Purah fan art. Hey, you guys have fun with that. At least she looks like an adult now, but I still remember when she was 6.
Literally.
Last week! I ain't touching that with a Zonai Fuse pole. But anyway, we see that
Ain't
in
wrong.
Tears of the Kingdom, Purah steps into her own as a helpful inventor. Mostly reformed, but with enough
Sure,
quirkiness to
mostly.
keep her lovable. I guess most of the ancient Sheikah technology bricked after the defeat of Calamity Ganon, so Purah's been inventing modern alternatives, like the Skyview towers that make wayfinding a breeze, albeit by comically launching Link into the stratosphere, or the Purah Pad, trademark, that replaces the Sheikah slate. Fun fact, a lot of the Sheikah's names in Japanese refer to fruit, Purah's being an anagram for apple, and she just released a new iPad. Is Purah Steve Jobs?
I wouldn't be surprised if she was.
She's a great consultant for Princess Zelda, and in Age of Calamity, you can see her and a younger Robbie put their work into tangible
Dang.
action. They're quite the combat artificers, though I do find it funny how Robbie's in the thick of it with his chainsaw arms while Purah's usually behind him dropping AoEs. It's pretty clear which one's the guinea pig. I also love the detail that her glasses share the design of the Lens of Truth from Ocarina of Time, which was also
those
a
the
Sheikah
owls
relic.
from, like, the
This, to me, sells the
Kingdom?
idea that
The
Purah's
owl eyes?
always looking
Looks
to
like it.
glean the truth in everything that she sees, and it makes her great for suggesting where Link should go next if you're ever stuck in Tears of the Kingdom. Come to think of it, Purah's the de facto leader of Lookout Landing, a kind of pop-up shelter that she built in the midst of the upheaval to protect the citizens and raise an army. So,
That's nice of
in
her.
a way, while she declined becoming the Kakariko Elder, she does
Pretty
end
much
up
is
accepting
the
the
Kakariko
role of
Elder.
a leader, just in her own ramshackle Purah way. She's making incredible things, and I'm constantly questioning her sanity. That's a
And
mad
she all-
scientist by definition, and I'm glad she's on our side.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, the fact that she took, like, a age reversal thing, didn't even bother to, like, try to get it back before starting flirting with Link, like, oh boy. Ay. I mean, no wonder she's kind of a mad scientist. She's just like, whatever works, I guess. Oh boy. I mean, yeah, not mad in the traditional sense, but mad in, like, it's good. I need results! I mean, if you think of it like that, it's still a mad scientist that way. I mean, if you want to think of it like that, it could be, but what do you guys think? You think that counts? Let me know. Still, yikes. When you got no regrets or, like, no qualms about morality and, like, think about the consequences, you know you're a mad scientist. Anyway, next. 7.
Fun poll for you guys.
Good.
Who do you think is the smartest Pokemon professor? They all have their areas of expertise. Professor Elm is researching Pokemon
True.
breeding,
I
Sycamore's
mean, we
got
could
Mega
make
Evolution,
Oak. I mean,
Kukui...
he's the...
well, he's busy moonlighting as a luchador. Furthermore, this is a
Lucha.
fake poll anyway, because all of the tree-named professors pale in comparison to the brains behind Team Plasma,
Oh.
Colress.
Polrest. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, true. No qualms about ending the world.
Despite being pivotal to the events of Black and White 2, Colress is usually behind the scenes or off doing his own thing. In fact, I suspect he was already working for Team Plasma in Black and White 1. It would explain
be.
some of their crazier technology, like the subterranean castle that
Yeah.
rises to envelop
Ah.
the Pokemon League, or the program to hack into trainers' PC boxes to steal their Pokemon. But
Yikes.
unlike the sycophantic
Yeah.
grunts of the
Hacker.
first game, Colress isn't one to spout their hypocritical rhetoric against Pokemon training.
Yeah, he
On the
doesn't care.
contrary,
He just wants
Colress's
technology.
only concern is discovering the best method of unlocking a Pokemon's potential. be that through a trainer's love and friendship, or Getis' manipulation and cruelty. In the sequels, we see Colress invent a fusion device that allows the Ice Dragon Kyurem to reabsorb the legendaries that originally spawned from it. I think Colress sees Pokemon as just data and energy. If they can be shrunk into tiny balls and transferred through computers, why not just add them together? Dude would love infinite fusion. Colress also builds an airship
he hasn't made
that
that,
Kyurem's
but
unearthly
again,
coldness
yeah,
into a
that actually became a
devastating
thing in
freeze ray
Pokemon.
that wreaks
The main
havoc
game,
on
not,
Populusid
you know,
City.
here.
I've said this before, there's no way that this didn't cause casualties somewhere. Also
Yeah, no
funny how
kidding,
this
just
art
giant
counters
ice.
the Populusid gym leader's dragon types, so there was little chance of resistance to this attack. But when Colress is confronted about it, he's blasé about what's possibly the biggest attack on a civilian area in mainline Pokemon history. He's utterly detached from human morality, as unfeeling as the Magazone and
doesn't
Clink
care.
Clank that headline his artificial-themed team. It only just dawned on me while writing. The name Colress is a shortening of colorless, and his Japanese name is Akroma, meaning the same. Like Kyurem, he's neither black nor white, but completely morally gray. It's an interesting change of pace for a Pokemon antagonist, as he really doesn't mind if he turns out to be wrong in what he's trying to do. Being wrong and changing your hypothesis is just part of the scientific process. As spoken by respected scientist Adam Savage, failure is always an option. Which means that as easily as he was convinced to aid in atrocities, he can be convinced to leave Team Plasma. You beat him in a few Pokemon battles and he decides, hey,
fair enough.
Your way of training is stronger than mine. Thanks for the data. And he becomes a better person. Not because he wants to be, but because he concludes that it's just a more efficient way to train Pokemon. And I love that. And I think Game Freak loves that too, because Colress has kept quite busy since Generation 5. He gets a name drop in X and Y that shows that he's been studying the science of Mega Evolution. Makes sense, that's another form of strengthening Pokemon. He's also been studying Z-moves in Sun and Moon, and he'll give you the drives for Genesect, suggesting that he was involved in that whole thing too. To date, the latest stop in his so-called redemption arc is Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Not only is he contracted to help with the Ultra Massacre, providing similar fusion devices to let players harness different forms of Necrozma, he's also instrumental in the Team Rainbow Rocket event, where the player takes on alternate universe versions of the series' greatest villains. Colress at first follows you around with an invisibility device, yeah, that's a thing he has, and every time you beat a boss, he uses his achromatic wearable console to send that villain back to their own dimension. Not because those trainers are evil, but because he thinks that the Aether Foundation is the best institute of science on Earth, and he doesn't want it trifled with. That, and as he admits, he hates all forms of Getsus now and would have gladly banished him anyway. So not only has Colress mastered scientific topics that multiple professors have dedicated their lives to, he technically is the best villain on the grounds that he defeated all of the other series villains. Not in an actual battle, mind you, but rather by yeeting them from our universe. Pokemon laid off referencing old characters in the past few generations, to a blatant extent anyway, but I wouldn't be surprised if Colress popped up in Galar trying to recreate Eternamaxing. But I'm still happy that we haven't overused this character. He works well as a man in the shadows, intervening only when it benefits his research. Considering how vital he was to Plasma and the Aether Foundation, I always want to know more about him, but his scarcity lets him own every scene he's in. He's a pragmatic.
I'm kind of curious what happened if, like, the next game we saw him again.
The only thing I don't like about him is that stupid-ass Mobius strip hairstyle. No way a guy this devoted to science has time to gel that every morning. I'm guessing that thing got caught in Clink Clank's gears, and he's just kept it like that ever since.
Yeah, fair. So, where do you guys think we'll go next? Like, after
Given the popularity of this archetype, it's no surprise that I had to leave out some classic egghead villains. Sitting around the number 11 and 12 spots for me are Dr. Albert Wily from Mega Man and Dr. Neo Cortex from Crash Bandicoot, who both fit the theme to a T, but didn't quite wow me enough. Dr. Wily has had so many great evil plots that they all kind of blend together in my mind, and the limited storytelling of his mostly 8-bit games makes it harder for me to be truly entertained by him. Cortex, meanwhile, is an extremely endearing character. We love to watch him fail, but too often his failures make him the secondary or even tertiary villain of his games. If only we can get a classic cartoon mad scientist that's consistent like Wily, but a joy to watch like Cortex. Well, if I put these two in the character fusemogrifier, pour their liquidated mixture into a metal body, and add some cheese-flavored 80s soap opera for some zing, we'd end up with something approximating Dr. Nefarious from Ratchet and Clank. This is a tough section to write. I
Nefarious, how
already
you
went
doing?
over Nefarious thoroughly in my top 10 villains list, and I don't want to be redundant, let alone
Repeating.
redundant. But with his tenacity,
Said that
lunacy, and the galactic scope of his schemes, he managed to bully the other contenders off this list. Poetic because Nefarious turned to evil precisely because he was bullied in school by the future Captain Quark. The once humanoid science student rose to be a mustache-twirling supervillain worthy
Without
of
the
Quark's
mustache, though.
exaggerated macho heroism. Like, a lot of Nefarious's schemes seem like overly meticulous plans designed to achieve very vague goals. After his erratic mind was put into a robot body, he came out of hiding with a metal chip on his shoulder and tried to convert the population of the star system into robots like him with the Biobliterator. And I don't really know what that would do for him. I mean, he hates organic squishies, but I think if everyone were robots, his superiority complex would just force him to hatch a new, even crazier plan. But the fact that he could invent a weapon with that kind of power is impressive.
True.
Twice as impressive is the fact that he actually had a backup Biobliterator when Ratchet and Clank destroyed the first one. This is our first real doomsday device on the list. I guess Colres's freeze ray is close, but Nefarious is coming up with these on the regular. He has Ratchet and friends tied to an asteroid, and oh look, he just happens to have an Asteroid Flinger 5000 to throw them into space. Or when he wants to take over the Great Clock to rewrite history so that the heroes always lose. Still one of my favorite evil for evil's sake plans, by the way. The clock's guarded by a quasi-dimensional hive mind called the Zoni that are immune to conventional weapons, but Nefarious is nothing if not unconventional. He pulls out the hypersonic brainwave scrambler that ingeniously exploits an obscure weakness of the Zoni. The dude builds so many weapons, space stations, and robotic armies that he hardly bothers to announce most of them. Every time you fight him, he's busting out different high-tech weapons out of his cape. It's hard to keep up with them all. Blades, thrusters, missiles, electrostatic shields. He's actually extremely formidable. Though not the most formidable. Rift Apart shows us an alternate reality Emperor Nefarious, a more serious variant who conquered his entire universe. But you know, even if Emperor Nefarious was an original character, Do Not Steal, I'd still rather put vanilla Dr. Nefarious on this list for his lovably hateable antics. This is a list of mad scientists, and Nefarious is mad, bro.
Yep.
That's what makes it so good, Janice. Feel it.
Yeah, that keeps happening.
Pounding like an anvil.
Go ahead, buddy.
Oh, this is the best part of my day.
Yep, slap him.
Everything he does is inspired by hatred and ego. He's often the cause of his own downfall, but that doesn't make him any less dangerous. He's waving crazy guns with Doofenshmirtz-style names like the Dimensionator around, killing minions by accident, and then playing it off like a conscious choice. It's not that we're afraid that he'll succeed. We just have to beat him before he fails so hard that he destroys the galaxy. It's a formula so good, Insomniac Games continuously increased his billing in the series, going so far as to write him into the remake of the first game and imply that he invented many of Ratchet's tools. The Hydro Displacer, the Predator Launcher, and even the iconic XK-81 jetpack. He's not even obsessed with Quark anymore. In fact, I don't think the two even interact in Rift Apart. This villain, originally invented as a ridiculous mirror to the series' most ridiculous side character, has blown up into the most prominent villain in the series. One that's impossible to take seriously, and yet not taking him seriously is deadly. And he gave his butler paid paternity leave. What? He may be a villain, but he's not a monster.
I don't have the capacity for love, Janice. I was cursed by a tribe of
hit him again.
ninjas when I was a kid.
I know.
Go ahead. Let's go ahead. Talk some morning coming up. There you go.
We're crossing the halfway point of this list with the completely opposite approach to writing an eccentric scientist. Nefarious never claims to be anything but evil. He literally subscribes to supervillains weekly. And aside from situationally turning on his more evil counterparts, he's never going to seriously question his actions. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Mordin Solus from Mass Effect, a gaunt alien geneticist whose character arc is all about him questioning the morality of his greatest scientific achievement. Before we get into what that achievement is, though, let me clarify that being opposite Nefarious in terms of self-reflection does not make Mordin opposite in terms of being entertaining. He very well might be the most entertaining squad mate in Mass Effect. As much as I love this cast, I was always a bit disappointed with how secluded everyone is on the deck of my ship. Most of them keep to themselves with only a few unique dialogue choices before repeating a stock reply about how they're too busy to talk to you. That's why Garrus' calibrations are such a meme. Like, geez man, just say you don't want to talk. Mordin Solus spends most of his time in the tech lab, a location that Shepard will visit many times, and I think the writers knew to put extra effort into Mordin's leisurely conversation since the players would find the most opportunities to visit him. The man has a lot to say, albeit in his choppy, broken way of speaking.
Heard Kirihide died in Vermeer. Not enough equipment for operation. Still managed to take down facility. Good captain. Dedicated. Bit of a cloaca, though. Loved his speeches. Hold the line. Personally prefer to get job done and go home. Probably military bravado, jargon, chest pounding. No offense.
It's not that he's bad at English. In fact, it's a popular theory that he's the only alien not using a universal translator.
Could be.
It's just that his thoughts come so fast, so he chooses to break his sentences down into their base ideas to communicate them more efficiently. Not one word is wasted. If Mordin wrote this script, it'd be like 33% shorter without any conjunctions. But probably with just as much wordplay. He actually loves rhymes, often singing the Solarian version of Gilbert and Sullivan's Modern Major General.
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert, which I know is a tautology.
You can't romance Mordin Solus. Like my wife and my co-writer, he's ace as far as I'm concerned. But if you've spoken with him enough, he'll have comments about Shepard's love life, with unique dialogue for every possible companion, making him more aware of his fellow squad mates than any other character outside of Shepard himself. Yeah, he's a little weird, but he's the nicest Solarian you're ever going to be lucky enough to meet.
True.
Now, what was that scientific achievement of his again? Let's see, he strengthened a planet-wide genophage that effectively sterilized an entire alien race, specifically the Krogans. After a millennium, there's still no cure, and each day marches the Krogan race to becoming closer to extinction. What the fuck, Mordin?
Pretty much.
Now, there is a lot of nuance around the genophage, mind you. It was developed during a rebellion where the Krogan, who reproduce like rabbits, have the organ redundancy of cattle, and have the mindset of bloodthirsty orcs, were threatening to bludgeon all forms of government in the galaxy into submission. The Solarians developed the genophage as more of a deterrent. They didn't expect the Turians to actually detonate the damn thing. Mordin himself didn't actually invent the genophage. It was developed millennia ago. But he was part of a team that covertly modified it to keep the Krogan from overcoming it. That's still an extremely inhumane thing to do to a civilization. But if you try to discuss this with Mordin, he doesn't want to hear it. He's had years to grapple with what he's done, and he can justify it from every angle. It was for the best, or the number of people negatively affected is offset by the number of people it protected, and so on. Mordin's more than happy to show you the pie chart. At least until you join him on his loyalty mission to find his old student who's been working on a cure. When faced with the human, well, Krogan lives affected by him and seeing the lengths people will go to undo his work, Mordin's shaken. He gets defensive, then angry, and eventually so overcome with emotion that he lets Shepard make the final decision on what to do about this. Quite the change from the guy who claimed that he was 100% justified before. And once you get him back to the ship, Mordin returns to his usual cheery self. That is a limitation of the games, I think. The game's not going to write a whole book of alternate base convos depending on how early you did this mission, so it's just going to reset Mordin back after his little side quest is done. But I like to think that this is part of Mordin's disposition. When he's protected by the four walls of his laboratory, seeing the consequences of his actions only as data on a screen, he's in his safe space. There's no uncertainty when it comes to science. Also, Solarians, though living shorter lifespans than humans, are able to process information faster to compensate. So it's possible that Mordin can just work through his grief a lot faster when he's not right next to the rotten Krogan carcass. 6 in one, half dozen in another. Funnily enough, if Mordin survives to Mass Effect 3, he'll be put in charge of reversing the genophage. Mordin claims that this isn't a change of heart, it's the circumstances of the war that changed. The genophage was deployed at the proper time, strengthened at the proper time, and now he's going to cure it at the proper time. We're eventually put into a very Star Wars situation where Mordin needs to ascend this collapsing tower to finish dispersing the cure. He's hell-bent on doing this, and depending on your playthrough, you may or may not be okay with the Krogan increasing their numbers again. And all of the possible endings to this conflict are fire. If you just let him go, Mordin will hype himself up before sacrificing himself to cure the genophage, all according to plan. Unless you got to know him a little better, in which case you'll see this heartbreaking scene where he's nervously singing his theme song to himself while he completes his final mission. But if you try to stop him, you get an emotional outburst that we didn't think Morden was capable of.
Every time we've talked about this before, you've defended the genophage. Hell, I had to talk you into saving Malin's data. How can you change your mind now?
I made a mistake! I made a mistake. Focused on big picture. Big picture made of little pictures. Too many variables. Can't hide behind statistics. Can't ignore new data. My responsibility. Need to go. Running out of time.
Unless Morden died in the final mission of Mass Effect 2, he will always come to this conclusion. This shows that he's always regretted his choice deep down. The only thing changing here is whether or not you can get him to say this out loud. Morden Solus gives a haunting glimpse into the potential consequences of genius, and what it's like to know that your work changed the world for the possible worst. We mentioned Oppenheimer before, and Morden is a caffeinated little
he
Oppenheimer.
became death, destroyer
In a
of
time of
worlds.
desperation, Morden made the tough call to choose what he could do over what he should, and it's an action that he can never take back that hangs above his head until his dying day. A doomsday device played straight. No funny name and no histrionic countdown destruction. And if the hero stops him from fixing it, we don't cheer. In fact, it's probably the most brutal choice you can make in this game. I would rank him higher, but I don't think he's mad enough. I think Morden Solus is just very, very sad.
Oh, 7's coming up. Oh, that's up for...
Let's try that opposite segue again. You see, Morden Solus is a scientist that I adore so very much. I want to be his friend, even knowing the mistakes he's made. Across that spectrum is Professor Hojo, who I want to punch in that stupid, wrinkly face. Many fans say Final Fantasy VII is more science fiction than fantasy, and I would say that that's kind of the main conflict. The world of Gaia is full of magic and wonder, but the Shinra Corporation has taken over by confining all of that fantasy into a science. At the center of this is Professor Hojo, a man hell-bent on understanding every process in the world, from photosynthesis to cellular regeneration to the lifestream and summoning materia. He scoffs at the notion of magic. If something happens, it has laws.
For a reason.
It can be understood, and it can therefore be harnessed.
Oh boy.
Then again, Hojo scoffs at most things. He's an egotistical, abrasive lunatic, and more than half of our main cast has personal beef with the guy. For example, back when he was the apprentice of Professor Gast, a misguided but comparatively kind researcher, Hojo confined Aerith and her mother to a life of constant experimentation, trying to understand their biology as the last living members of the ancient Citra. When Gast tried to help the two women escape, Hojo personally tracked Gast down and had him killed, also leading to Aerith's mother's death while on the run, and Aerith becoming an adopted orphan with little understanding of her own powers. Hojo also abducted Nanaki, one of the last members of an intelligent quadrupedal race, and apparently he cared so little about Nanaki's personhood that he branded and renamed him as Red 13, a designation Nanaki then internalized over his own birth name. Oh, and given the chance, he tries to make Nanaki and Aerith breed.
Ew.
Oh, you want to know why? Because this is my fetish!
That's gross, dude.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest twists of the game is
think
that
that works
this
like that.
despicable man also bred offspring, resulting in the one-winged angel Sephiroth. Yeah, more casual fans might not know this, but Sephiroth's not actually the son of Jenova. Not directly. He just thought he was.
Jenova still.
Hojo had relations with a fellow researcher named Lucretia, then injected her baby in the womb with Jenova's alien space god DNA, just to see what would happen. As a result, Lucretia turned into a weird cave crystal thing postpartum, and Sephiroth, though the greatest warrior in Shinra's soldier program, eventually went crazy and destroyed Tifa's hometown before getting killed himself. But Hojo wasn't done. He then took Sephiroth's DNA and injected it into a bunch of other test subjects, including Cloud Strife. Keeping these test subjects in his lab for years, Hojo eventually allowed them to escape, forming the reunion theory that all of these Sephiroth clones would be subject to the will of the original Sephiroth, who was still in the life stream. and would eventually culminate to help Sephiroth destroy the world. Also, he shot Vincent and turned him into a pseudo-vampire. And he was a general dick to all of the employees at Shinra, including Reeve, aka Kate Sith. His research took funding away from Sid's space program, his Mako reactors are hurting the planet, which is Barrett's whole thing. So yeah, everyone in the party would like to punch
Everyone
this guy
hates this guy for
save
passion.
for maybe Yuffie, but I think she'd spare a punch for him too. But unfortunately, he's just too good at his job for Shinra to let him go. He's at best unpleasant to everyone, but he's also hard to get a read on. He'll chastise Aerith's rescuers to think logically about this, then run away while unleashing a biomutant that's likely to destroy his supposed priceless test subjects. And that's a little cheat code with writing these sorts of logical characters. They always say they're being logical, but their actions are usually driven by some emotional desire that they themselves might not even understand. In my research, I spent hours trying to figure out what this guy actually wants, why he'll be all self-preservation in one scene, but ensure his own destruction in another. And I think I found my answer. Hojo isn't trying to understand the world for the world's sake. He's not trying to take over the world, not really anyway. And in a roundabout way, he's not even trying to garner the truth from all this. He just wants to be right. He wants to prove to himself that he was a better scientist than Gast, his predecessor. He wants to see his reunion theory play out, and at the world's destruction say that he already guessed the ending. While the rest of the Shinra executives are trying to protect Midgar from Sephiroth, Hojo goes rogue and overcharges the Mako reactor, sending more power to Sephiroth and risking a meltdown that would kill himself and everyone in the city. In a twisted sort of way, he's doing it for Sephiroth.
That's my boy, destroying the world and merging with the livestream. I made that happen. Me!
And from another angle, the fate of the planet is a battle between Aerith and Sephiroth in the roles of life and death, the children of Gast and Hojo. The Mad Doctor's betting his pride on the apocalypse and he dies for it. Though we later find out in Dirge of Cerberus that he had his personality backed up to the net, so maybe this isn't as self-sacrificing as I make it out to be. And while we do eventually stop Sephiroth, it is the end of the world, at least as we know it. Hojo sort of wins. There's a quote by sci-fi writer Arthur C. Clarke, who gave us the screenplay for 2001's A Space Odyssey. And in his 3 Laws of Fiction, Clarke states that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Hojo is a character epitomized by fighting that law. There is no magic, and there is no science or technology that cannot be distinguished. At least that's how he sees it. He basically dissected the planet and didn't bother to stitch it back up again. No stone unturned, no nerve unexamined. He needs to understand every single facet of it. And in a world of giant chickens and robot cats riding robot cats, there's something so insane about a guy who takes it all so seriously.
Yeah, honestly, that is definitely look out for. You know, you gotta feel bad for him. I mean, I don't know if he should feel bad, but yikes. The fact that he just did all that just to prove himself right, ugly. You know this dude was insane in the membrane. But, that'd be said. Come on. Well, anyway, Final 3. Let's go. We're going for Persona 5, though I think I can already guess who. Maruki? I think. It does say Royal, so it has to be him. See? Has to be our doc.
Let's do this opposite segue one more time. Hojo doesn't care about what happens to the world so long as his research is validated. For number 3, we have someone who well and truly cares about the world and everyone in it. Which is kind of the problem.
Yep.
Dr. Takuto Maruki is a likable enough guy. He was added to Persona 5 Royal as a new confidant, and while to some who played the vanilla version he might feel a little slapped on, I actually think the writers did a good job working his characterization into the overall narrative. Maruki is hired to work as a counselor at Shujin Academy after the Kamoshida incident, and hiring him might be the only smart and decent thing that this principal has ever done in his career. After what that maniacal gym teacher put them through, there's a lot of kids who could use some therapy. And he's a legitimately good therapist. Okay, let me rephrase that. He's great at making people feel better. Any real psychologists playing this game are gonna see some big therapy no-nos from him, but we'll get to that. The Phantom Thieves are skeptical at first, not helped by the fact that he bribes kids to come to therapy sessions with snacks, but his adorable attitude wins the gang over, and throughout the rest of the game, each of the Phantom Thieves gets a chance to meet with him, self-reflect a bit, and unpack
even the
their
ones that
individual
don't go to the
struggles
school,
without
like
divulging too
Yusuke
much
and
about their
Futaba.
paranormal
I'm not
activities.
kidding.
It could just end there and be perfectly nice, but we can't have nice things, can we? Psychology in the real world is what's referred to as a soft science. A bit tougher to turn that into a pillar of madness. But this is the world of Persona, where cognitive science is a very real field. It turns out that
Futaba's
like
mom was
Futaba's
looking
mom,
into it.
Dr. Maruki was researching the metaverse before all of his research was stolen away by main baddie Masayoshi Shido for his own nefarious purposes, and Maruki was forced to temporarily abandon his researching days. Maruki's a big part of why this game's plot happens, and when it's all wrapping up and Joker's team overthrows Yaldabaoth, the god of control keeping humanity in a state of willful ignorance, Maruki finds himself in the perfect position to take that power for himself. Maruki plays the role of villain in Royal's new final plot arc, though many fans debate about applying the term villain.
Basically, gotta max him out and Katsumi out, and you'll be good to go.
Wants to help
Sumire, if you know what
and uses his new godlike power to reshape reality into one where everyone can be happy. Maruki looks back on the therapy sessions he gave all those
mom's
kids
back.
and resolves
Morgana's
to take
got a human body.
Futaba's mom is back from the dead. Yusuke's mentor appreciates him. Ryuji never breaks his leg. Everything is better for everyone in this new reality.
Too.
Right? Well, yes and no. There seems to be limitations to this power. Philosophically speaking, universal happiness isn't possible because people's individual wills are bound to conflict. So Maruki decides, hey, I'll just change people's will to make everything copacetic. Dude, that's mind control.
Pretty much.
While this is well-meaning and maybe even a net positive for the world, or Japan, or however far his influence actually spreads, there is something inevitably fake about Maruki's improved reality. And the fact that he can make these changes to people's lives without their consent, that he's the sole person responsible to decide who gets what they want, it inevitably makes Maruki's world a hard pill to swallow. It's a tough...
That is actually true. Like, remember, we had experience with, like, changes in cognition, you know? Almost everybody. But when it came down to it, our character, Sumire are the only ones that realize, hey, hold up, something's off. Like, that's how big this is. Like, the rest of the Phantom Thieves was just like, hey, happy days, yay! But, yeah, they basically didn't even notice. Like, I think for us, the fact that we had, like, the wild card, which definitely made us immune to, like, the, you know, reality change. So that way we can recognize, like, hey, this doesn't look right. That is honestly something. You gotta admit, that is definitely interesting. But still, the fact that he thought, like, hey, we're gonna change the wills. I mean, he does come up with, like, a reason for this. Like, his girlfriend was attacked and, you know, the girlfriend was attacked back then and she was traumatized, and it was to the point that, though he accidentally changed that, he got rid of every memory of him from her. Yeah, it's... just play the game, you'll be surprised. Anyway.
Tough moral dilemma. And while the writers of the game are loud about what choices they think are right, they still put that choice in the hands of the player. See, Maruki's got a bit of a messiah complex. He's willing to put the weight of the world's conflicts on his shoulders so that everyone can be happier, but he's not ready to say that he's 100% right. He wants you to tell him that. So rather than wiping Joker's memories, he allows Joker to stand against him if he really wants to. If you decide to take up Maruki on his deal, you'll get an alternate ending where everything is perfect, and we're just left to wonder how sustainable all that is. We even get unique art in the credits of this quote-unquote bad ending. Or, if you choose to let the deadline pass without confronting him, he'll lament your lack of conviction and put you in a state of eternal sleep, relieving you of the stress of making any tough decisions for the rest of your life. Don't wake up, don't get out there. But if you choose to fight, you'll have to climb his mind tower, and man, it's a doozy. A lot of environmental storytelling here, with lines of patients being told that they don't need to overcome their trauma and become their best selves. Maruki will just fix everything for them. And I haven't even touched on what he did to Yoshizawa. Yeah, your life would be way better if you were just someone else. Take all those feelings and push them way
back!
He's certainly a sympathetic
basically
villain,
changed
a guy
it to
who
think
wants to
that she
help
was her
others
sister.
even if it causes him pain,
Not
but
kidding.
also wants
Look it
to
up.
run from that pain forever and thinks everyone else should do the same. In this case, the mad scientist is a madness that we can understand, a flawed logic that we can get behind, or heck, even agree with, to the point where it kind of breaks down your own ability to moralize a situation. And oh yeah, he has his own persona. And it's a monster from H.P. Lovecraft, one known to induce madness in those curious enough to seek him out.
Look at that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Should have eaten those snacks when we had the chance.
Heads up.
We've jumped all around the mad scientist multi-spectrum. So what happens if we take all of those entries, throw them in the Hadron Collider, crack a few eggs in there, and a red and black jumpsuit?
There we go. Eggman.
Eggman Robotnik.
There he is.
And for
Hello,
some
buddy.
reason, the machine caused him to grow a mustache. Isn't science wonderful? So let's see. Last time we saw Eggman on this channel, he was in my top 10 mech pilots, right? This ovular overlord certainly panted at his fair share of war vehicles. Yet that is but a fraction of his contributions to scientific villainy. The man has designed and mass-produced countless varieties of robotic minions and factorial superbases. The hyper-adaptive E-Series robots, the gargantuan Death Egg, and the ever-popular Bucket of Sushi fast food restaurant. Now serving fish.
Yeah,
His
I'm good.
reputation precedes
Thanks.
him, but does he really capture all the qualities of our previous scientists? Is he really as outlandish as nefarious, as brilliant as Morden, as despicable as Hojo, yet as sympathetic as Maruki? Well, he's been around for nearly 35 years, brought to life by dozens of artists, writers, and voice actors. So the answer to that question is... depends on the game. When it comes to the classic cartoon arch-villainy of Nefarious, Eggman easily clears. I mean, he's already played the villain in no less than 6 cartoon series. You can have him as buffoonish as The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, or as menacing as Sad AM. But let's focus on the games. Eggman's goals confusingly include both world domination and opening his own theme park, Eggman Land. Simply put, he wants to make people happy with the stipulation that they worship his 300 IQ genius. That frankly ludicrous intellect
and blew up the
impressive
moon. Thanks,
blowing a hole
man.
in the moon, entirely blowing up the Earth. It got better. And even ventures across time and space. He's enslaved alien races and erased parts of history on occasion. And sure, he often needs to be saved from his
control
own
of like a
plans, but
time
can you
meter?
really call yourself a mad scientist
kidding.
if you've never lost control over a being you created or a god whose power you harnessed?
No, Sonic,
it just comes with the territory.
Omega,
Even Frankenstein knew that. While he can be a total nincompoop on occasion, that Morden Solus level wit is razor sharp. He's very good at flipping the situation where he needs Sonic's help into, surprise, I'm taking over the world again. See Sonic Lost Worlds and Sonic Chronicles.
Pretty much.
Maybe not Sonic Chronicles. This little moment in Sonic Adventure 2 always stuck with me, where on a snap decision, he accuses Sonic of handing him a fake Chaos Emerald and...
He's right.
You thought you could trick me with that fake emerald, didn't you?
So, how did you know it wasn't the real one?
Tails! Because you just told me, Fox Boy.
That's pretty slick, Ivo. Tails certainly never forgot that, L. As for the Hojo qualities, yeah, Eggman can be a real monster sometimes. His initial MO was kidnapping baby animals as power sources for his badniks. I think that's why he was originally modeled after Theodore Roosevelt. He's an industrialist threatening nature, building enormous factories and metal horrors at the expense of woodland creatures. Though, historically, Roosevelt did a lot of good for the preservation of nature, so I'm not sure if the original artist thought about that comparison. Sorry, off topic.
Okay.
He later utilizes chaos drives as a more fuel-efficient battery, only to go right back to the enslavement crap when there are cute aliens to exploit. And he programs some robots like Orbot and Cubot to be
bigger the power source,
idiots,
the bigger he'll go
just so
for.
he has someone to yell at. After finding the body of his thought-dead comrade Shadow, he hides him away in a warehouse full of mass-produced Shadow androids just to screw with his sense of identity. Shadow could have been a good guy way earlier if Eggman just wasn't being a dick here. And don't invite Omega to the family therapy sessions because he will show up
destroy
and
them all.
he will share his feelings. His 50 caliber feelings. But does Eggman have that well-meaning heart like Maruki?
I mean, in Frontiers, you do see that.
Sort of, yeah. Misguided as he may be, he's ultimately trying to make a world that people will enjoy, just in a completely nonsensical way, hence the mad part. Eggman was deeply affected by his grandfather, the great scientist who created Shadow and the space colony Ark for originally benevolent purposes. Not to mention the death of Maria, who would have been Eggman's cousin. Eggman would have grown up with the great expectations to follow the footsteps of his grandfather, whom the government mislabeled as a criminal, and then turned him into one.
True.
And when Maria was caught in the crossfire, this might have really messed with Ivo's psyche. Made him feel
His
the
family
need
got
to be
killed. Can you blame
remembered,
him?
and yet see the futility in trying to play by the rules. This is actually explored in the IDW comics.
Oh.
While not technically canon to the games, yet.
Yeah,
And while
sure,
I also
yet.
like
There are
Archie's version of
references.
Eggman, a Dr. Doom level strategist, these recent comics do a great job in explaining how all of these disparate characteristics can belong to the same quirky, complicated man. Comic writer Ian
Hey, there it
Flynn
is.
even supervised the story of Sonic Frontiers. Here we get maybe the most sympathetic Eggman yet, as he grows a fatherly attachment to his AI program Sage. He's a maniacal egotist who never learned to be part of this world, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have feelings. In many ways, Sonic Frontiers celebrates the long history of these characters, and a villain who, at this point, wouldn't enjoy victory if it didn't include the bombastic defeat of his longtime rival Sonic. If you looked up mad scientist in the dictionary, the picture next to it might look remarkably egg-shaped. He is truly the Frankenstein of video games, just with a more scrambled mindset, a tendency towards poaching wildlife, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of a sunny side.
That's X for you. And number 1, see who tops Eggman.
I told you, I was the only worthy
Wesker?
one.
Guess he counts. I never really felt Wesker was like a scientist. But,
Eggman may be the best video game mad scientist current science can devise, but science isn't about settling for what's possible. It's about finding that next step beyond. And that next step is Albert Wesker, semi-recurring villain of the Resident Evil franchise.
Oh, I think
Resident
he's
Evil
permanently
may be
retired
the most
now.
emblematic video game
At least I
of science
hope so.
gone wrong. An ongoing zombie apocalypse born from illegal testing of biological weapons. No one person can claim responsibility for the entire pandemic that is this series. That's just the way science is. It's a collaborative effort. But Wesker has stood on the shoulders of giants and reached up his arms to grasp the heavens. So let's talk about this legendary egotist.
Egotist.
Yep.
Preposterous.
You are one.
That
Shut
word
up.
implies I have an inflated sense of self-importance. But I am, literally, the key to mankind's evolution. It's impossible to think too highly of me.
Sure, buddy.
Whatever you
Given
say.
your upbringing, I can see why you think that you're the best of the best. Taken from his family at a young age by the Umbrella Corporation, Albert was one of a dozen talented prodigies to take the name
The Wesker
Wesker
children.
in a eugenics program, where children were injected with enhancements, psychologically manipulated, and systematically tortured to weed out the weak and find the ultimate biological and neurological candidate. This inhumane practice was inspired by Friedrich Nietzsche's theory of the Übermensch, an idealized ultimate human. This idea was later adopted by many of fascist organizations to justify treating some
master
types
race.
of people as genetically superior to others. That certain people were born for greatness and thus entitled to rule over others. In this case, it's more like engineered for greatness. Wesker would later turn Nietzsche's concept into his entire personality. While secretly grooming Wesker for leadership, Umbrella put him to work as a geneticist in developing their many viral war crimes. Most famously, the T-Virus, a bioweapon able to zombify the masses. Wesker's team was also working on the Tyrant Project, which would allow them to make super zombies akin to Mr. X or Nemesis. But when funding began to slow down, Wesker refused to sit idle. He instead began working for the US military, taking advantage of his optimized human physiology in combat and keeping the government off of Umbrella's scent as a genius spy. However, as Wesker learned more about how Umbrella altered the course of his life, he made plans to steal his own research, which he would trade with a number of equally shady organizations in the coming decades. We don't
Basically,
see Wesker in the lab very
if
often.
they can use
Those
them,
parts are mostly in the backstory.
you can use them.
But throughout Resident Evil, we're constantly seeing the results of that experimentation. The first outbreaks in Raccoon City that Wesker contributed to, and eventually the monstrosities in West Africa that Wesker made solo. And because he's also a super spy and usually out there messing up with the crime scenes, he has both a past and present effect on the post-disaster locations that you constantly visit. He's playing double duty villain-wise, both the architect of evil and the active threat. the nerd in the chair, and the action hero in the field. Which
much?
action hero? Clearly Neo. I mean, look at him.
Yeah, he's tough as a
Recurring
Neo
villains
vibe.
like Dr. Wily are famous for their quick getaways, just slipping away after the hero has thwarted their latest plan. Wesker is similar, except he's never actually thwarted. Maybe Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield managed to prevent the current zombie catastrophe and escape with their lives, but Wesker casually walks away with whatever information he wanted. In Resident Evil 1, he's impaled by a tyrant, but we later discover that he was enhancing himself with a perfectly dosed strain of the T-virus, which, rather than zombifying him, just turns him into Wolverine and lets him walk off any damage. What doesn't incinerate him makes him stronger. He manages to scrub the Spencer Mansion of any useful information, and then later appears in Code Veronica to gather research from the Ashfords. The heroes are on the back foot trying to deal with him, finally burying him under a mass of steel girders just so they can escape with their lives. Wesker's agent Krauser may have died in Resident Evil 4, but Wesker was still able to get the parasite sample off of him, combining it with the T-virus to create Ouroboros, which he perceived as the jumpstart to human evolution. You see, Wesker doesn't hide behind his robots or his guns or even behind his tyrants. Wesker fights you with his prized invention that he's been perfecting for years, himself. Like Hojo, Wesker thinks he sees how humanity ends, but unlike Hojo, he doesn't plan to end with it. He's getting in on the ground floor of what comes next.
What did I invent? Why, only the most impressive feat of science in history. I invented myself. I am the apex of human evolution, the Adam for the next species to rule Earth. And if I'm Adam, and I made Adam, well, that makes me God, doesn't it?
I don't think scientists are supposed to kick this much ass, but Wesker's no ordinary scientist.
True.
He's a super spy soldier scientist. He can casually throw grown men several meters and create shockwaves when he punches, runs so fast that he appears to teleport, and he calculates perfect trajectories while firing his custom Beretta 92F semi-automatic pistol. And he does all of this with sunglasses, because his bioengineered senses are strong enough that he can see in the dark, plus he can throw them like a shuriken, revealing his glowing tiger eyes, and somehow doing this makes him faster. Seriously, that's a mechanic in Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Really?
It is scientifically proven that wearing sunglasses makes you more powerful. But what many don't know is the moment you remove the sunglasses, you get a temporary spike in power, proportional to the amount of times the sunglasses were worn. This equation is officially recognized as Wesker's Law. And before anyone asks, I wasn't cut from Infinite's roster, I simply refused to attend. I won't be
now I'm curious
game
who's
of such
doing the voice.
middling quality.
Wesker is a step above any mad scientist because
I thought it was like voice lines, but
completely crazy.
this was definitely
And
someone
yes,
doing a voice.
He's bioengineered some truly heinous things. Look at what he did to Lisa Trevor, or to Jill in Resi 5, whom he turned into his personal mind control bodyguard. Oh, and while he was with the Umbrella's rival HCF, he started developing a mold version of the T-virus, so all that stuff in Resident Evil 7 is his fault
And 8.
too. But most interesting to me, he is both creator and project, both Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. By taking on his perfected Ouroboros, he becomes a raging cocktail of virus, parasite, and super soldier serum, making boulder-punching Chris Redfield look like a clown. Nothing short of 2 rocket launchers and a volcano can unmake this man's creation. And he's just so damn fun to watch! He's like a movie cliche played out by someone who's never seen a movie in their life. I'll mock the way this guy talks, but I will never get tired of it. Every scene with this guy is a shot at the Guinness Book of World Records for vanity, an award he's already won. And he believes every bit of his own hype without an inch of sarcasm. If he met the other scientists on this list, they would all tell him to chill. He would Kali Ma Medic's Uber charges out of everyone's chests. He would fight Colres's Pokemon himself and then eat all of their rare candies. He would give Maruki a mental shutdown. He's the smartest guy in every room he enters because no one with half a brain could stand to talk to him. He is absolutely insane, and he has a doctorate in biology. What else is there to say?
You've said quite enough. That was the Green Scorpion. And I, Albert Wesker, have finally achieved complete countdown domination.
Well, didn't expect that. And I'm seeing who's done the voice. This is interesting. Is Comic Foil Ari Alex Rohan? I think it was Alex who did it, but I don't know. But still. Okay, so that was Alex. Still, dang. That's actually pretty impressive. So, let me know what you guys think. I guess we'll see who's next after this. Till then, adios!